10 Creepiest Unsolved Mysteries from Oregon, United States. No matter how much we persevere or how many hours we spend investigating, there remain some life mysteries that were never meant to be solved, but they make for great television at least. Shows like Cold Case Files and Unsolved Mysteries gained nationwide approval for telling the stories of countless true crimes that have no ending. To bring the mystery into our own backyards, keep watching for Top 10 Oregon's famous creepiest unsolved mysteries. Number 10. Jeromy Doland Bright. Jeromy attended the Coos County Fair in Oregon with his 9-year-old sister and a group of his friends on August 14, 1986. He and his sister separated at 2 p.m., agreeing to meet up again near the Ferris wheel at 5 o'clock. He never showed up at their meeting place and has never been seen again. Jeromy lived in Grants Pass, Oregon in 1986, but he had grown up in Myrtle Point and had many relatives living there. He and his younger sister enjoyed the fair and their stepfather agreed to take them there for the week so they could go to the festivities. There were several possible sightings of Jeromy in the local area in the days following his disappearance, but none of them were confirmed. He was a basketball player in 1986, and was looking forward to starting high school. Many rumors circulated about his disappearance but none of them have been substantiated, but the Coos County Sheriff believes he died the day he was last seen. Authorities do not believe Jeromy left of his own accord. He was close to his sister and it would have been uncharacteristic of him to abandon her, and he did not take his wallet or extra clothes when he went missing. His mother and stepfather were going through a divorce in 1986 and he may have been somewhat troubled as a result. His grades dropped during the school year prior to his disappearance. However, he was described as a popular, likable teenager and a star basketball player who was looking forward to the start of the school year. Due to the lack of evidence in Jeromy's case, it is classified as a non-family abduction and a potential homicide. His family believes he's deceased and they held a memorial service for him in August 2011. On the 25th anniversary of his disappearance. Jeromy's mother thinks his body is somewhere in Coos County. His case is unsolved. Number 9. Robert Michael Bobo. Bobo was camping in a remote area in the Rogue River National Forest between Prospect, Oregon and Union Creek, Oregon in October 1998. A female friend dropped him off at his campsite in the Woodruff Meadows area near 700 Road on October 2, 1998. Bobo was last seen at approximately 9 p.m. by 2 area hunters. He has never been heard from again. One of his friends arrived the following morning for the opening of hunting season and discovered he was gone. He was reported as a missing person at that time. Bobo left behind all of his belongings, including his favorite baseball cap, 2 rifles, all his clothes and all his camping gear. He is not believed to have had any money with him at the time of his disappearance. Numerous searches were conducted of the area around Bobo's campsite, but no evidence was uncovered. Authorities stated there were no indications of foul play, but they do not believe Bobo left of his own accord. They believe he may have been scouting another campsite and become injured or had a medical emergency and was unable to get back to his own camp. Bobo's relatives fear he met with foul play. However, his brother stated he never went anywhere without wearing his baseball cap and would not have voluntarily left it behind at the campsite. Bobo was employed as a part-time woodcutter at the time of his disappearance, and lived in Prospect. His case remains unsolved. Number 8. Celia Darlene Barnes. Barnes was last seen hiking near the 6000 block of the right fork of Sardine Creek Road, in the area around the House of Mystery in Gold Hill, Oregon on September 1, 2002. She had gone hiking that day with her sister. They separated to look for aluminum cans. They were supposed to rendezvous at Barnes's sister's car, but Barnes never showed up and has never been seen again. She had been reported missing before when she got lost while hiking, but was found safe and was angry at her family for sending out a search party. As a result, this time her family waited 30 hours before informing the authorities. Barnes may have been spotted on the day of her disappearance by a man who said she told him she was going back to her sister's car. Another witness might have seen Barnes at the Valley of Rogue State Park. Tracker dogs traced her scent to the off-ramp of North Interstate 5. Police believe she walked down Sardine Creek Road to the highway. 2 residents of the neighborhood reported having seen her. None of these sightings have been confirmed. A week after Barnes disappeared, a man in Gold Hill found the bronze ski pole she used as a walking stick. He has passed a polygraph and is not considered a suspect in her case. Barnes resided in the 100 block of Brookside Boulevard in Merlin, Oregon at the time of her disappearance. She is an experienced hiker and an ex-Marine who served in Vietnam. Her family does not believe she left of her own accord and think she may have been abducted, but little evidence is available as to her fate. Number 7. Kenneth Budlong. Budlong was last seen on September 24, 1995. He went on a solo climb up Mount Hood, a 11,235-foot peak in Mount Hood National Forest. He was climbing Cathedral Ridge on the left side of the mountain, a route he'd never taken before. When he didn't call home the next afternoon, his family became concerned. A search was launched on September 26, and search teams found Budlong's tent near the McNeil Point shelter, at the 7,000-foot level. Inside was a backpack, a sleeping bag, a climbing book and a Bible. There was no sign of Budlong, however. He has never been heard from again. The search efforts were hampered by freezing rain and high winds. Budlong is a very experienced climber. He'd climbed Mount Hood 22 times before, and other mountains as well, and he'd survived an avalanche a few years before his disappearance. He was well equipped with food and survival gear when he went missing, including a space blanket, warm clothing, crampons and an ice axe. He didn't have his helmet, however. Authorities believe Budlong suffered an accident on the mountain, possibly on the Reed Glacier, but his body has never been recovered. He was employed as a global inventory manager for Nike at the time of his disappearance. Number 6. Benita Gay Chamberlin. Chamberlin was last seen between 10 o'clock and 11 a.m. on February 23, 1978, leaving Sacred Heart General Hospital in the vicinity of 13th Avenue and Hilliard Street in Eugene, Oregon. She had given birth on February 13 and was released from the hospital, but her baby daughter remained hospitalized due to prematurity and low birth weight. Chamberlin went to the hospital that day to nurse the baby. She was told she could take her home sometime after 1:30 p.m., and telephoned a female friend to tell her the good news. She has never been heard from again. Her mother reported her missing at 1 a.m. on February 24. At 2:30 a.m. that day, Chamberlin's purse was found lying on the ground in a parking lot on the University of Oregon campus. Shortly after 5 a.m., her blue 1966 Mercury Comet was found in the parking lot of a Coca-Cola bottling factory on Franklin Boulevard, near the hospital. There was no sign of her at the scene. Chamberlin was in the process of a divorce at the time of her disappearance. She was separated from her husband and lived in the 20 block of Howard Avenue. Her older 2 daughters lived with their father. She had worked as a maid at the Holiday Inn on Coburg Road for approximately 5 months before she went on maternity leave. Her co-workers said she was well-liked and a reliable employee, and she was also described as a dedicated parent who would never have left her 3 children, the oldest of whom was 7 years old in 1978. She is a graduate of Churchill High School. Her case remains unsolved and the circumstances surrounding her disappearance are unclear. Number 5. Angela Lynn Chan. Chan was last seen by her husband of 2 years, Bruce Chan, when he dropped her off at their home in the 1500 block of Southwest Lava Avenue in Redmond, Oregon on the morning of March 27, 1989. They had been trap shooting together. After he dropped her off, Bruce returned to his station at Camp Pendleton in Oceanside, California, where he served as a lieutenant in the Marine Corps. 2 days later, on March 29, Angela's family members reported her missing. Her yellow Datsun B210 was found that same day in a pullout along Highway 126 near the Klein Falls Bridge, west of Redmond. It was still operable and had fuel in the tank, but the passenger window had been smashed in with a rock. Angela's shoes and purse were inside the vehicle. Angela has never been heard from again. Bruce and Angela were separated in 1989, he was at Camp Pendleton, and she had moved back in with her mother in Redmond and was seeing another man. She told her mother she wanted a divorce and was going to tell Bruce when she saw him on the day she vanished. In spite of the problems in her marriage, her family stated she was happy and planned to move forward with her life. Authorities believe Bruce may have been involved in her disappearance, but there is no evidence to support this theory besides the circumstances. He now lives in Arizona. Although authorities initially believed she left of her own accord, Angela is now considered to be missing under suspicious circumstances. Foul play is suspected in her case, which remains unsolved. Number 4. Jeromy Ivan Childress. Childress was on an annual elk hunting trip with Shane Louis and Louis' young son, Shane Jr., in Tillamook County, Oregon on October 17, 2004. He was last seen at 4:30 p.m. that day at Tucka Creek Road and Boundary Road in the Tillamook National Forest. He was carrying a rifle, a wallet, his car keys, half a pack of cigarettes, and possibly a pocket knife at the time of his disappearance. Childress became separated from his companions in the forest after they became lost trying to find their way back to camp. He walked into the brush alone, saying he thought he could find the camp by himself. The Louis eventually made it to the rendezvous point, but Childress never arrived. All of his overnight gear was left behind at camp. He has never been heard from again, and an extensive search turned up no clues as to his whereabouts. At the time of his disappearance, Childress was employed as an industrial bridge painter and blaster. He enjoys hunting, fishing, and boating, and he has 2 young children. The area where he vanished is very steep, rugged, brush-covered terrain with lots of gullies and fallen trees, and populated with wild animals including bears, cougars and coyotes. Foul play is not suspected in his disappearance. It is believed that Childress became lost or injured in the wilderness and died. His wife obtained a death certificate for him in 2006 based on the theory. His case still remains unsolved. Number 3. Teresa Ann Davidson Murphy. Teresa resided with her husband, Richard Murphy, and her 2 children in Rainier, Oregon in 1999. The family lived in the 72,000 block of Hutchison Road. They relocated from Puyallup, Washington in July 1999 to be closer to Richard's relatives. Richard and Teresa had been married since 1998. A photo of Richard is posted below this case summary. Teresa dropped her daughter off at a friend's home for a sleepover on October 7, 1999. Richard told authorities that his wife returned to their home afterwards. He departed on a camping trip to Browns Creek in the Olympic National Forest in Mason County, Washington later in the evening. He told investigators that Teresa had disappeared by the time he returned home the following day. Her sister-in-law reported her missing on October 23, more than 2 weeks after her disappearance. The reasons for the delay of the report are unknown. All of Teresa's personal belongings were inside the house. Her pickup truck was parked near the residence with the keys in the ignition. Teresa has never been heard from again. Her sister-in-law reported her as a missing person on October 23, 16 days after she vanished. Richard also reported that the family's 1991 Colt 1911 A1.45 caliber semi-automatic handgun with serial number 2,757,178 was missing from their home after his wife disappeared. The weapon has never been located. Her 2 teenage daughters were placed in their father's custody and moved out of her home with Richard later in 1999. They now live in Klamath Falls, Oregon. In August 2001, nearly 2 years after her disappearance, authorities announced that they believe Teresa is deceased. Her case remains unsolved. Number 2. Stephanie Douglas. Stephanie was last seen at 10:30 p.m. on November 27, 1990, when she put her 3 children and her niece to bed in their Minville, Oregon residence. Sometime during the night she apparently taped a note to her neighbor's door, reading, "Please check in on my kids. I had an emergency." She has never been heard from again. Stephanie's husband, Stan Douglas, arrived home from work the following morning and found the children safe in bed and his wife missing. Stan told the police he found her car the morning after her disappearance in the parking lot of a department store in Minville. Other cars in the lot were covered with ice, but Stephanie's car was not. Harold Stuckey was convicted of murdering Stephanie's best friend, June Cross, who disappeared 2 weeks after Stephanie did. Cross vanished from Tacoma, Washington, but her body was found in Yamhill County, Oregon, where Stephanie lived. Authorities believe Stuckey convinced Stephanie to leave her home the night she went missing, but they are unsure why. One theory is that she went into the woods to retrieve a cache of drugs. Stuckey refused to take a lie detector test in Stephanie's case and also denied involvement in Cross's murder. Stuckey is not the only suspect in Stephanie's case. She had been involved with drugs and prostitution and knew several violent criminals. Stan had allegedly been abusive towards his wife and he failed a lie detector test after her disappearance, but he had an alibi for the time she vanished and authorities have never been able to tie him to her case. Stephanie was also a close friend of Larry Shipley, a convicted murderer who had once been married to Cross, but no evidence links Shipley to Stephanie's disappearance. Scott Cox, a presumed serial killer who is currently incarcerated, is another possible suspect. Authorities investigated several possible sightings of Stephanie in the months following her disappearance, but none of the sightings were confirmed. They believe she was murdered, but they cannot charge any suspect due to a lack of evidence. Her case remains unsolved. Number 1. Anne Marie Ellenwood. Anne was last seen in Corvallis, Oregon on April 15, 1978. She participated in a March of Dimes walkathon, her third, that day. The route was on a bike path along the Marys River. At 1 p.m., Anne told her friends her feet hurt and they should go on without her. She said she would go to a checkpoint at the Gill Coliseum. She was last seen near the Pioneer Park ball field, across Highway 34 from the Coliseum. Anne has never been heard from again. She had an afternoon paper route delivering the Gazette-Times, but never showed up for it, which is uncharacteristic of her. Her parents reported her missing at 5:15 p.m. An extensive search of the area turned up no sign of the child. A red pickup truck with a teardrop-shaped trailer was seen in the area around the time of her disappearance. 11-year-old Stephanie Newsom disappeared from West Salem, Oregon on April 19, 4 days after Anne. The girls were similar in age and appearance and were last seen walking alone during the daylight hours. Due to the similarities, police immediately suspected the disappearances were linked. They were looking for a possible suspect in Anne's case, described as a Caucasian man with a stocky build, reddish-brown or sandy hair, a gruff voice and possibly a mustache. The suspect in Stephanie's case had a similar appearance, stocky, in his late 20s, with shaggy light brown hair. Stephanie's partially clothed body was found on April 25 in a field next to the Ankeny Wildlife Refuge. She had been dead for several days. Investigators determined she'd been raped and strangled. By May, police had identified a suspect in Anne's disappearance and Stephanie's murder, Earl F. Woody Chambers. A photo of him is posted below this case summary. He had a prior record for rape and assault of young women, and he owned a red pickup truck and a teardrop-shaped trailer, like the one seen in the area where Anne disappeared. Police brought him in for questioning, and he denied any involvement in Anne's disappearance. He was ordered to appear before a grand jury on June 6. The afternoon of June 6, however, Chambers's body was found in a rural area in Lynn County, Oregon. He had committed suicide, without leaving a note. The investigation went cold after Chambers's death, but since 1978 law enforcement had made periodic efforts to resolve Anne's disappearance and Stephanie's murder. Hair found in Chambers's trailer and vehicle, believed to be Ann's, was tested for DNA in 2005, but the results were inconclusive. Chambers remains the prime suspect in Ann's disappearance. Ann was a 7th grader at Highland View Junior High School at the time of her disappearance. Foul play is suspected in her disappearance, which remains unsolved. If you enjoy video, please subscribe my channel. Thank for watching.